calling to order. Okay.
Well, just like this.
Yeah, that's one.
Just say delegates. I'd like to.
Delegates, distinguished delegates, I would like to call the meeting to order. I invite delegates to take their seats, please. Delegates to take their seats, please.
Leave it for a bit.
Delegates, please take your seats.
So Joyce is sitting behind you,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting at.
Delegates to please take their seats. I request delegates to take their seats, please. Delegates to please take their seats. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I take it as a great honor to declare the fourth meeting of the subsidiary body on implementation open. Distinguished delegates, it is with great sadness we note the tragic passing of the President and Foreign Minister of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And on behalf of all delegates, I express our condolences to the Iranian people and government and the bereaved families. Good morning. Namaste to all the distinguished delegates. I welcome you all to Nairobi, a beautiful green city and also UNEP campus that energizes us with plenty of oxygen. Before I proceed further, on behalf of all of us, I would like to express solidarity with the people of Kenya for the suffering they have undergone due to the recent flood catastrophe. I am grateful to all of you for facilitating me to be here in this chair of SBI. I feel honored to chair the fourth meeting of the subsidiary body. I should not forget to inform you that this SBI is unique in the sense that it is the first one after the COP15 held in December 2022. The task on hand is to tackle 16 agenda items, and there are 24 working documents. as well as many information and other documents. Let me not forget to remind you that there are some spillovers from Substar 26, which may raise the temperature of the hall. Let me not quote the list of agenda items to be discussed, as you might have done enough study by this time to be awarded a PhD. I take this opportunity to thank the President of COP, Dr. Liu, and COP Bureau members for their guidance and support. I also thank the Acting Executive Secretary, Dr. David Cooper, and the Secretariat and Secretary to SBI 4, Dr. Neil Pratt, for their support in facilitating this important international meeting. It gives me immense pleasure to thank UNEP Executive Director, Dr. Inger Anderson, as her presence here in this meeting is a great source of inspiration to all of us. I appeal to all of you to invest your time, energy, knowledge, and wisdom in logically pursuing decisions taken in COP15 so as to achieve major breakthroughs in COP16. Wherever there are human beings, there will be differences in opinions, views, and wherever there are issues for discussion, there will be contentious issues. All I wanted to say is that despite our differences and contentious issues, we need to debate, deliberate, and discuss to come to an understanding and consensus in the larger interest of achieving the 3 objectives of the convention through the implementation of Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. A great opportunity is before all of us, and let us fully utilize this opportunity to do something good for biodiversity and humanity. Let us not make the history of biodiversity conservation movement a saga of lost opportunities. Lastly, I wish to remind the theme of this year's International Day for Biodiversity and reiterate that let us be part of the plan. Thank you for your kind attention. Distinguished delegates, it is now my honor to invite the Executive Director of the UN Environment Program, Ms. Inger Anderson, to address the meeting. Ms. Anderson, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good morning, and a warm welcome to our campus, our home, the home of UNEP here in Nairobi. Some of you will have been here a little longer, and some of you will have just arrived. May your visit be pleasant. To you, Dr. Reddy, my congratulations on your selection and election. And of course, to Dr. Liu Ning, and through you, Dr. Ning, to the Chinese authorities and the presidency, a warm appreciation. You're probably holding the world record in the longest term holding a presidency of any COP, and we do appreciate the leadership that we have always seen from China. And to the incoming presidency, Colombia, we give our expression of deep appreciation and thanks for the leadership that you showed and your country showed when you offered so generously to host us in Cali. So a warm welcome to the 4th meeting of the Convention on Biological Diversity Subsidiary Body on Implementation. And my thanks to everyone who's here, and of course, as I mentioned, to those who were here for SAPSTA last week. You're nearly halfway through, but your time here is important, and I hope that you will be able to keep your energy levels up, because what you do really matters. We saw really good progress last week in SAPSTA 26, and I was just delighted to hear about the work that you have managed to agree on the monitoring framework and on the global action plan on biodiversity and health. This is very significant and something that I have indeed also been discussing with my dear colleague Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus from WHO, because these things do hang together. And I look forward to a strong framework and plan being recommended for adoption at COP16 in Cali in Colombia later this year. So friends, this is the first meeting of the subsidiary body, as you just heard Dr. Reddy say, on implementation since the adoption of this historic Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And the goals and targets of that framework committed at COP15 were both aspirational and inspirational, but they were also measurable, reportable, and monitorable. And we all know that it is implementation that counts. Some countries have already submitted their updated national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and the remaining countries are working to follow suit. And these strategies, as we agreed at the COP15, must take a whole of government, whole of society approach to deliver the GBF at the national level. And that means ensuring buy-in from ministries responsible for agriculture, finance, planning, health, and climate, from the private sector, from civil society, from indigenous people, and as Colombia reminds us, from Afro-descendants and subnational governments. We at UNEP are proud to be working with the United Nations Development Programme, with the Global Environment Facility, and with many other important partners to support you, the parties, in this process. But there's much to do before 2030, and time is not on our side. This body must look at delivering strategies that will enable countries to deliver faster, deliver better, deliver quicker, and deliver smarter. You will be looking across many areas of the package of COP15 decisions: mechanisms for planning, for reporting and review, a resource mobilization and financial mechanism, capacity building and development. And it is through its ambition on the full package of decisions from COP15 that we can truly deliver on the global biodiversity framework. With a clear recommendation from SAPSTA to finalize the monitoring framework, you have now the task of recommending national reporting templates, the forum for country review, and the procedures for the global review of implementation of COP16. It also falls to you to make recommendations on resource mobilizations, including on the revised strategy of the GBF. This is a critical point of discussion, because to succeed, the GBF needs sufficient resources. And in this regard, UNEP is very pleased to be working with China in this regard, announceables of which will come very shortly, I am sure, from Beijing. And all of this will help us, but we obviously will need more. And so we need everyone to step up. And so I ask that you approach the discussion on resource mobilization with the same level of ambition that we saw at COP15. On technical and scientific cooperation, I welcome the interest from many regional and sub-regional entities to provide support for implementation. This is very important. Clear operational and financing mechanism for the support will be needed to ensure that the network of institutions deliver maximum benefits to parties. As I said earlier, time is not on our side. COP16 is fast approaching. 2030 is fast approaching, and biodiversity is still declining across the globe. So I encourage all delegates present here that you show the kind of focus, the kind of compromise, the kind of ambition that this COP has always been recognized for. That you advance the work on the means of implementation that meet country needs, and that you help ensure that biodiversity is put back on the path to recovery for the benefit of people and planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson, for your inspiring remarks, for your support to this convention, and for your great hospitality in hosting us at this important meeting. I would now like to invite the Acting Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Dr. David Cooper, to address the meeting. Mr. Cooper, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. gives me great pleasure also to welcome you to this fourth meeting of the subsidiary body on implementation, the first meeting, of course, after the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. I'd like to welcome Dr. Shira Ashalanda Reddy in his role as chair of this subsidiary body, and wish you all the strength to lead us through this ambitious agenda that we have this week. I'd also like to thank the people of Kenya and our colleagues here at the UN offices, including UNEP in Nairobi, for welcoming us here. We have more than 13,000 registered participants for this meeting, coming from over 150 countries. I would like to thank again the 13 governments for their generous financial support that supported the participation of delegates from developing countries. And that's Austria, Belgium, Canada, Finland, Germany, Japan, the Republic of Korea, New Zealand, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Thanks also to Australia, Canada, Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK for helping to secure the support of 14 representatives from Indigenous peoples and local communities. As I said last week, of course, we know the importance of the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities, women, youth, civil society, other groups in this process. We're all here to further strengthen our collective efforts to implement the Global Biodiversity Framework, the Biodiversity Plan. We had a very productive meeting last week, as the Executive Director also just mentioned, and some of the outcomes, of course, will inform the discussions this week. I'd like to express my congratulations again to the Chair of SBSTA and to all delegates for their hard work last week. Thanks also to the COP presidency, to China, to our chair, to the Bureau, the COP Bureau, to my colleagues in the Secretariat for the preparations for this meeting. I'd also, however, like to apologize to you, Mr. Chair, to the Bureau and to all delegates for the delay in posting of the documents for this meeting. I recognize that this adds to the challenge, your challenge of preparing for the meeting. I'd like to thank the Bureau for their guidance in this regard and for the finding a path to move forward. Distinguished delegates, as others have said, this meeting of SBI is critical on our path to COP16 in Cali, Colombia. Again, we're very grateful to Colombia for hosting our next COP. And as the first COP after the adoption of the Biodiversity Plan, this ambitious plan that provides us with a set of concrete goals and action-oriented targets, we must demonstrate that the framework is being implemented. We must also make sure that we have all the mechanisms in place to support that implementation and to monitor progress towards it. Later this morning, we'll review progress in doing that, in updating the national biodiversity strategies and action plans, in setting national targets. Of course, this is an ongoing process. Many countries, all countries, I believe, are engaged in this process, engaged in their communities, in ensuring a whole-of-government, whole-of-society approach. And of course, we will also come back to this at SBI 5 just before COP16. I'd also like to acknowledge the progress report on the program of work on Article 8J in related issues, relating to the role of Indigenous peoples and local communities and traditional knowledge. Of course, a new program of work prepared by the working group last November will be considered at COP16. And I just want to take this opportunity to note that this week, on the 25th of June, we'll have some informal discussions, a dialogue to further enhance common understandings among parties and observers on the elements of this program of work to facilitate, then we hope, its consideration at COP 2016. So, as you know, we made great progress last week here in Substa on the monitoring framework, and your discussions this week will complement that, looking, as Inga has already outlined, at a number of aspects related to the planning, monitoring, and review of the implementation of the biodiversity plan. And of course, this work also builds upon the recommendations coming from Substa 25 that took place here last September. We'll also have very important discussions on the mobilization of financial resources, on the financial mechanism, and on technical and scientific cooperation, among other things. And of course, this work has been prepared by a lot of intercessional work. I want to thank in particular the co-chairs of the Advisor Committee on Resource Mobilization, Ines Velay and Patrick Luna, and all members of that committee, and also all the other advisory groups that have supported the work here. We'll also be looking at cooperation and synergies among various instruments, building on the Bern process, and thank you to Switzerland for hosting and facilitating that and for always helping us drive forward that agenda. We'll also be looking at the effectiveness of our processes and our future program of work, and we'll also be looking at methodologies related to the Nagoya Protocol. Ladies and gentlemen, I think parties and partners have demonstrated a remarkable commitment to advancing progress towards the implementation of the framework. One of the most positive outcomes, of course, has been the establishment of the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund under the GEF, with contributions currently standing at a little over $230 million, and now already nearly half of that, $110 million, are committed supporting 24 countries in the preparation of grants covering all aspects of all objectives of the convention, and substantial contributions to supporting the role of indigenous peoples and local communities. We've also seen increased engagement of the private sector facilitated by initiatives such as the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. COP15 issued an invitation to other conventions, other organizations to consider endorsing or supporting the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And the response to that call has been incredibly encouraging, with positive statements and commitments coming from the UN General Assembly, United Nations Environment Assembly, and many conventions, including the Climate Convention, many biodiversity conventions, and now also the chemicals conventions, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm, and Minamata conventions. Also great support from many organizations, including FAO and WHO. I'd also like to highlight, of course, the importance and the actions of various stakeholder groups, the youth group, women's groups, other aspects of civil society. All of these actions and support are critical for the whole of government and whole of society approach that is expected through the new framework. There is still a lot to do. We have very ambitious targets to achieve. We're looking forward to COP16 in Colombia. I believe with the common sense of purpose that was demonstrated in Substa this week, and also in the discussions on digital sequence information yesterday, we have, day before yesterday, there is a clear determination to succeed. You are demonstrating a clear determination to succeed. Let's work together this week and make further progress. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper, for your introductory remarks. We look forward to your continued support in facilitating this important meeting. We would also like to express our thanks to you and your team for your hard work in preparing for this meeting. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Liu, the representative of the President of COP15, His Excellency Mr. Huang Ruiqi, Minister of Ecology and Environment of the People's Republic of China, to address the meeting. Dr. Liu, you have the floor, please.
Sorry, the interpreter couldn't hear anything from the floor.
From UNEP, distinguished David Cooper, Acting Executive Secretary of CBD, Ambassador Pedro Leon, incoming presidency from Colombia, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Bonjour, asubuhi. Please allow me to speak in my presidency language.
Good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to join the SBI4 on behalf of Minister Huang Ruiqi from China, President of COP15. Thanks to the parties, Sector 26 was just successfully concluded with productive outcomes. We shall continue with our work. Just now, the Secretariat has also introduced our productive outcome. However, we hope after the weekend, we shall be fully charged to engage in the intensive negotiations this week. Last October, in this very room, with support of the parties, stakeholders, and the CBD Secretariat, and the UNEP, just as E.D. Anderson has mentioned, CBD COP15 was successfully concluded, spanning 3 years and across 3 venues. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is an important outcome of the conference, which has set the direction for global biodiversity governance. Since then, we have been taking global actions. Discussions such as the KMGBF monitoring indicators, resource mobilization and financial mechanism, DSI synthetic biology, and Article 8J have progressed very well. China is actively fulfilling its role as the COP15 presidency, with support from all parties and stakeholders. Together with 7 parties, UNEP, CBD Secretariat, and others, we have launched the KMGBF Implementation Initiative. On many occasions, such as the Union 6, we have been calling for greater synergies among MEAs to jointly promote the implementation of the KMGBF and maintain the political momentum of biodiversity conservation. We are also promoting the realization of the Kunming Biodiversity Fund and plan to allocate 50 million Chinese yuan this year to support the first batch of projects before COP16. We welcome more countries and institutions to contribute to the fund to support biodiversity conservation in developing countries. We also want to invite ED Mrs. Anderson to China to sign the Kunming Biodiversity Fund Agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, SBI is an important mechanism to review the implementation of the Convention and its protocols and strengthens the implementation efforts of the parties. At this meeting, we will be discussing many important agenda items, including the implementation mechanism, resource mobilization and financial mechanism, capacity building and development, which will lay a solid foundation for implementing the KMGBF. Tomorrow is the International Day for Biodiversity. I am wearing the logo pin, which was sent by the CBD Secretariat to me. So the theme of this year is Be Part of the Plan, which means protecting biodiversity requires concerted efforts from governments and all of society. I fully believe that a tower is built when soil on earth accumulates and a river is formed when streams come together. Every action will make a unique and important contribution to the KMGBF. We are gathered here today to do our bit to protect the planet Earth, which means a lot for the human beings. I hope that colleagues will remain constructive and flexible in the coming days to jointly promote a positive outcome and realize the vision of man and nature in harmony. In closing, I wish you all the best in Kenya. Thank you.
I sincerely thank you, Dr. Liu, for your inspiring remarks, and through you our deepest appreciation to the COP President and the People's Republic of China for the leadership to the work of the Convention and in turning agreement into action through the implementation of Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. I will now shortly invite opening remarks from the regional groups of countries and major stakeholder groups. But before I do so, I would like to invite Ambassador Mr. Pedro Leon to make remarks on behalf of the Government of Colombia, who in a few months of time will be hosting us at COP16. Ambassador Leon, you have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. I start my statement by thanking yourself, Chair, Ms. Inga Anderson, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Mr. David Cooper, Executive or Acting Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity. I would also like to thank the other members of the Bureau. I would also like to express a warm greetings to all delegations here present. Peace with nature is the theme which Colombia has chosen for the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP16. Colombia will host that COP in October. Peace with nature is based on the recognition of the severe effects of direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity loss and the need to manage these in a holistic manner with the support of all sectors of society. Colombia is convinced that reconciliation with nature is essential to successfully achieve the goals of the Convention and the targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Colombia believes that COP16 should be an event which brings together different social stakeholders and knowledge systems. It's essential that we recognize the role of indigenous peoples, Afro-descendant peoples, and local communities in the sustainable conservation and use of biodiversity, as well as the need to protect their knowledge and wisdom as effective means to develop and prosper in harmony with nature. I would also like to mention that Colombia today is celebrating the Day of Afro-Descendants in Colombia, 21st of May. We are meeting here today to move forwards on the road towards the implementation of the Convention and in preparation for COP16. The meetings of these subsidiary bodies will define the scope of this call to live in peace with nature. For Colombia, it's essential that the indicators of the new framework reflect not just the realities of implementation, but also the most adequate means to achieve the 2030 targets and the 2050 goals. National circumstances and capacities need to be taken into account when we define the obligations of parties, in particular when it comes to reporting. We have to promote technology transfer for capacity building and development. In this regard, the creation of the regional and sub-regional centres is of great support. In addition, Colombia believes it's essential that we strengthen cooperation and synergies between the Convention and its global framework, with other frameworks implemented by multilateral environmental agreements to ensure that we avoid duplication of information. The Colombian delegation will work tirelessly to ensure that the meetings of this body will be successful, resulting in recommendations which reflect consensus and which enable us to move forwards towards our goals for sustainable conservation, use, fair and equitable benefit sharing, and that we continue on the road towards COP16 to ensure that that meeting is a historic one and leaves a mark through this call to live in peace with nature. I'll conclude by extending once again an invitation to all to come and take part in COP16 in Cali. Cali and Colombia as a whole awaits you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador Mr. Pedro Leon. Friends, before we proceed, I would like to request the Secretariat to provide us with some logistical information. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning, distinguished delegates. It's a great pleasure to see you all here. First of all, please just note that the meeting is being held in person only. There is no online participation available, but all plenary sessions will be streamed on UN Web TV and YouTube in all 6 official UN languages. Let me now provide some information on the use of microphones. To request the floor, press the button once and the light will turn green. When the chair gives you the floor, the technician will activate your microphone, the light will turn red, and you can start speaking. Delegates seated behind microphones allocated to NGOs, indigenous peoples and local communities, and major stakeholder groups such as women, youth, business, should identify their organizations before commencing their intervention so that their statement can be properly attributed. Delegates are requested to keep within the assigned time when taking the floor and to speak at a reasonable speed to facilitate the work of the interpreters. I will explain later in detail the assigned time for interventions. Regarding written versions of the statements, delegates are requested to upload their written statements using the online application on the meeting page. In case of any difficulty in using the online system, delegates may send a statement by email to statements@cbd.int. This greatly facilitates the work of the interpreters if you upload your statements prior to delivery. And please remember to speak at dictation speed. The statement will be posted on the website only after delivery. In any case, statements must be submitted within 1 hour after the close of the session in which the item was considered. In your submission, please make sure to include the name of your country or organization and the agenda item on the first page of the document that is uploaded. Uploading instructions were included in your priority pass email, along with your dedicated link, which leads you directly to the upload page. Kindly note that for reasons of transparency, all statements will be made public. There is no option for private submissions. In the event that a party observer has submitted more than one version of their statement, we will consider that the latest one overrides previous versions, and only this version will be considered. In view of the full agenda for this meeting, the chair will be limiting interventions to 5 minutes delivered on behalf of regions, 3 minutes for individual parties, and 2 to 3 minutes for observers as time allows. A clock is provided for you on the screen to help you manage your time, but please don't speed up your reading, again, for the sake of interpretation. All plenary sessions will take place in this room, where the seating is fixed. Parties and observers should ensure that they are sitting at the correct nameplate so that when they request the floor, they will be identified correctly to the chair. And stakeholder groups have sections identified by nameplates. Conference room 2 will be used for plenary sessions, and conference room 1 across the way will be set up as overflow with sound in English. And if delegates wish to follow the sessions in a different UN language, then please make use of the UN Web TV or YouTube's live stream on your laptop or phone through the meeting calendar and select the desired language. Conference room 1 and the combined conference rooms 3 and 4 behind us will be used for contact groups. Both of these rooms are equipped with programmable electronic nameplates specifically for UN organizations, intergovernmental organizations, IPLCs, and major stakeholder groups will be allocated some rows in advance in both contact group rooms, just by category and not by the name of organizations. However, delegates from parties and other governments are kindly requested to consult the Nairobi meeting page under the header microphone numbers for contact groups, which provides a list of each country's login code and step-by-step instructions on how to program the electronic nameplates. Please note that only one plate per party or other government can be programmed in the same room, and if the country enters the same code twice, the most recent will override the previous selection. It is therefore important for parties to coordinate amongst themselves with regard to who should activate their respective plate. Regarding side events, these will take place at 1:15 p.m. each day of the meeting, starting today, and each evening at 6:15 p.m. starting tomorrow. Please consult the online schedule as well as the monitors and the CBD events app for the event title, location and time. In addition to the schedule for side events, the CBD events app provides easy access to the meeting schedule and documents. It's available both for Apple and Android devices and can be downloaded at the link you see on the screen. Regarding the Share Your Content link on the meeting web portal, you will note that a Share Your Content tab located on that page, and using this link, parties and observers are invited to share publications, information material, and event flyers that are relevant to the issues being addressed by this meeting. Regarding the convention's social media accounts, regular updates of the meeting will be shared across 5 of the convention's social media accounts, being LinkedIn, X or Twitter accounts of the Secretariat and the Acting Executive Secretary, and 2 Facebook accounts. These will share updates using the hashtags SBI and SBI4. Please refer to the media section of the website for a direct link to these accounts. And finally, let me offer a few words about the venue. Entrance to the venue is open daily from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. Delegates may remain on the premises as late as necessary and may exit during the evening and late night hours as per meeting exigencies. However, there's no re-entry after 8 p.m. The River Cafe and Delegate Lounge will operate on extended hours during the week from 7 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. And when contact groups are taking place in the evening, the Delegate Lounge will remain open until 11 p.m. for coffee and snacks. Please note, however, that food is not allowed in the meeting rooms, but drinks can be brought in if they're in a container with a link. Finally, delegates, as we come together again, I do take this opportunity to remind participants of the code of conduct in place to prevent harassment at UN system events. And based on this code of conduct, all UN system events are guided by ethical and professional standards, and all participants are expected to behave with integrity and respect towards everyone involved here at SBI4. We look forward to your kind cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I would now like to open the floor for opening statements from regional groups. I would ask that you limit your statements to no more than 5 minutes. May I ask the representatives of the regional groups to now request the floor by pressing your buttons. Africa. You have the floor, and Senegal, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, Senegal is making a statement on behalf of the African Group. African Group would like to thank the government of Kenya for organising this important meeting. And following the recent flooding, we would like to express our sympathies to the Kenyan people. Today, our world faces a climate emergency. The harmful effects of biodiversity loss, degradation of ecosystems, and climate change require urgent action, global and concerted action. That's why the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework provides us with hope in terms of meeting the Agenda 2063 of the African Union and the 2050 Agenda to live in harmony with nature. Chair, we reiterate the commitment of Africa to the implementation and monitoring of the Convention based on an equitable approach, taking into account all aspects of the Convention's protocols. Chair, Africa welcomes all the measures taken, in particular by the advisory body on resource mobilization, the technical expert group on financial reporting, and the progress made on the fund for the Global Biodiversity Framework. We also welcome the developments in and selection of technical and scientific support centers at regional level and sub-regional level, and options related to the Global Coordination Entity. Chair, we warmly welcome, or we strongly call for capacity building, dedicated capacity building for parties and cooperation to improve the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Africa also welcomes the initiative of the three-phase project for the clearinghouse mechanism for biosafety and calls on UNEP to carry out capacity building, placing emphasis on national difficulties in using the tool. The opportunity provided by this meeting is great, Chair. However, we are deeply concerned by the late distribution of documents, in particular pre-session documents, which has had an impact on our preparations. We would like to remind the Secretariat that statutorily documents need to be made available at least 6 weeks in advance of meetings. In addition, we reiterate the importance of means of implementation as an integral part of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This includes the creation of a global fund dedicated to biodiversity. A global fund dedicated to biodiversity. All that being said, Chair, our region is ready to contribute to discussions here and to play a full part in contact groups to ensure great progress in the implementation, effective implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We would also like to thank all of our partners, the African Union, the Commission of the African Union, NEPAD and other partners. And personally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our colleagues for the renewed trust placed in Senegal to chair the African Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal, for speaking on behalf of Africa. On behalf of Asia and Pacific Group, Cambodia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegate, ladies and gentlemen. Cambodia is speaking on behalf of the Asia and Pacific region. The Asia Pacific region takes this opportunity to sincerely thank to the Republic of Kenya for hosting the first meeting of the subsidiary body for implementation. We extend our gratitude to the UNEP and the Secretariat and to those who assist in preparing the document for this important meeting. We would also like to convey our condolence to the people of the Islamic Republic of Iran for the loss of their president and the delegation. Mr. Chairman, our region presents a diverse array of environmental and political circumstances shaped by our unique geographical, economic, and environmental context. This different, we share a unified commitment to biodiversity conservation and protection. We wish to highlight the critical element necessary for the effective implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, such as capacity development, resource mobilization, and enabling mechanism. We recognize that the capacity building and adequate financial resources are essential for the developing our regional and national capability to effectively implement the three objectives of the Convention and achieve the goal and targets set in the GBF. Despite this challenge, the Asia-Pacific region has made significant progress in implementing the Convention program of work and its protocol. In terms of capacity building, we are pleased to announce that NB-SAP dialogue has been had in most sub-regional and in the Asia-Pacific. This review mechanism has successfully facilitated the exchange of views on common challenge and progress in implementing the GBF within the region. However, we acknowledge the existing gap in capacity development at the national level, which remains a significant challenge for achieving the GBF goal and target. In this regard, the Asia-Pacific region urged developed partners, those who with relevant technical capacity, to explore the partner with our region through innovative, cost-effective solutions to address capacity building needs. This collaboration would significantly enhance our ability to implement the GBF effectively. Regarding the resource mobilization and financial mechanism, our region is proud of the progress made through existing initiatives such as Japan Biodiversity Fund, BioBreed Initiative, and established Kunming Biodiversity Fund by the government of China at the COP15 presidency to safeguard the global implementation of the GBF. Nevertheless, our region stressed the need to add two additional resources to implement the broad range of activity and program. We call for new, adequate, predictable, and effective financial mechanism and technical support. We urge developed and donor parties to consider innovative, cost-effective, and practical solutions tailored to the unique solution of the developing country to enhance their capacity for effective GBF implementation. Mr. Chairman, Asia-Pacific region regard the revise and update of NB-SAP to align with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework as fundamental step for successful implementation. This alignment ensures that national and regional strategies are coherent with global objectives, facilitating more effective action and coordination. Our region is proud to announce that the first 4 countries from Asia-Pacific, Japan, China, Mongolia, and Republic of Korea has successfully completed their NB-SAP revision. This shows us a good model not only for the Asia-Pacific but for the other regions as well. Furthermore, we emphasize the importance for robust information sharing and technical transfer mechanism. These are critical for equipping our regional with the necessary knowledge and experience to address biodiversity challenge to the implementation of the GBF effectively. We hope this meeting will thoroughly explore and reach consensus on the practical modality, mechanism, and mean for GBF implementation. Such discussion should focus on the practical approach to mainstreaming biodiversity into sectoral and development plan, establishing clear guidelines, fostering collaboration, and ensuring that all parties have support needed to achieve our shared biodiversity goal. Additionally, Our region expressed concern over the adequate time to review document before this meeting due to the late upload. While we understand the CBD Secretariat having the workload in preparing extensive document for multiple meetings, we request timely document release for further meeting, particularly before COP16 in October 2024. We acknowledge the demanding agenda this meeting, comprising numerous items for discussion, consideration, and agreement in light of the timely number of delegations from the certain developing countries. Our regional recommended the meeting refrain from conducting parallel contact group to ensure all parties have equal opportunity for full participation in the process. Finally, Mr. Chairman, the Asia-Pacific region reaffirmed its commitment to continue collaboration with all parties and stakeholders to ensuring that the outcome of this meeting are comprehensive and constructive documents that will be submitted to the COP16 for consideration and adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cambodia, for speaking on behalf of Asia and the Pacific. Now I will move forward. Group of Latin American and Caribbean countries. Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, members of the Secretariat, and esteemed colleagues. GRULAC would like to begin by expressing our most sincere solidarity with the people of Kenya and Brazil for the damages caused by the intense rains and floods of recent weeks, and in particular our condolences to the families and friends that have lost people by these extreme weather events. This is the first meeting of the subsidiary body on implementation since the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. For GRULAC, this moment marks a critical juncture in our collective efforts toward effective implementation of the KM-GBF. Our region is home to some of the world's richest ecosystems and biocultural diversity, making the successful implementation of this framework vital not only to our countries, but also to the future of life in the planet. Our region is hosting the next COP16 in Cali, Colombia, so we are very committed to making substantial progress in the short time we have. Reaching consensus wherever possible will allow the journey until October to be enjoyable for everyone. GRULAC is making important progress towards the implementation of the GBF, reviewing, updating, and aligning our MBSAPs to the global framework. The discussion that we will undertake on the mobilization of resources is paramount. Our region is pleased that the GBFF under GEF is operational and that the first projects have been approved, although in a very low number, taking into account the number of projects that were presented and the challenges regarding implementation we face in our countries. In this regard, we must express our deepest concern about the low level of pledges and even lower contributions. We call on developed countries to deliver on their differentiated responsibilities in this regard, in line with Articles 20 and 21 of the Convention and Target 19 of the KM-GBF. GRULAC expects a highly ambitious outcome, one that matches the bold aspirations of the global framework. Adequate funding is essential for us to meet our biodiversity goals and ensure sustainable development in our region. For GRULAC, a balanced implementation of the KM-GBF is not possible without a capacity building and development program that supports technology transfer. It must be a program that is consistently updated, reflecting the three objectives of the Convention and the needs of developing countries. We underscore the importance of planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. Our region believes that the global review should be a party-driven process and is committed to engaging actively in the negotiations regarding the modalities of the global review of collective progress, noting that the focus should be on providing support and assistance in the implementation of NBSAPs in a collective manner. Full and effective participation of developing countries at all stages is essential to reflect the diverse perspectives and needs of all parties involved. Only in this case, it will fulfill its role of successfully tracking collective progress in the implementation of the framework. GRULAC regrets that funding was provided for only one delegate per developing country. This has made challenging for many delegations to participate fully in all discussions during Subset 26, and it will prove more challenging during SBI 4. We emphasize the need to conclude contact group meetings at reasonable hours, to avoid parallel contact groups and other informal negotiation processes, and to respect the established rest days in order to preserve the health of delegates. GRULAC will propose text addressing these concerns in the document on the effectiveness of processes under the Convention for future meetings of the Convention. On the procedure for selecting future executive secretaries, GRULAC wishes to address the issue under the agenda item on budgetary and administrative matters. To ensure an inclusive and transparent selection process, it is crucial for the COP to agree on its interpretation of the revised administrative arrangements between UNEP and the Secretariat of CBD, contained in Annex 1 of Decision 10/45. In closing, GRULAC would like to reaffirm its unwavering commitment to the 3 objectives of the Convention on Biological Diversity and its Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our region continues to play a vital role in the conservation of global biodiversity, its sustainable use, and the access and benefit sharing of the use of genetic resources. We stand ready to contribute actively and constructively to all discussion and negotiation during this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina, for speaking on behalf of GRULAC. Now, European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, the European Union and its 27 member states wish to convey their heartfelt sympathies to the people and government of Kenya following the devastating recent flooding. In all corners of the globe, recent months have brought devastating weather-related disasters, from flooding to heat waves and wildfires, that have caused terrible damage and loss of life. It is clear that the urgency to act as a global community has never been greater. Implementing the Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework at all levels is an essential part of the effective, inclusive, and sustainable actions needed to address this triple planetary crisis. The EU and its member states are committed to actively contributing with other parties to the success of SBI 4, and we are looking forward to exchanging views and learning from each other in the ongoing process of updating national biodiversity strategies and action plans to fully take account of the adoption of the GBF. We also consider it extremely important that we work collectively to set up a good system to assist us all in the process of planning, monitoring, reporting, and review of progress on implementation of the GBF. We are, however, concerned by the less than optimal preparations for this meeting, including in relation to the extremely late availability of documents, and we would again strongly insist to respect the rule of procedures in that regard. It is important that we take a good look at the functioning and effectiveness of mechanisms and processes under the Convention and its protocols, given that we are now once more moving into a crucial implementation phase. It is clear from the discussions at Substa last week that the current structures are not necessarily the best ones to address the needs of all parties in the context of implementation of the GBF, and this requires careful consideration collectively. The EU and its member states stress the importance of all countries having access to adequate financial and human resources to fully implement the GBF. In this regard, we are in favour of adopting the modalities for the operationalisation of the Global Coordination Entity for technical and scientific cooperation. We would also like to highlight the need to reinforce the Global Coordination Entity with the Global Knowledge Support Service for Biodiversity to bring together the tools and services required to support the implementation of the GBF. We look forward to the decision from the COP Bureau on the selection of the regional technical and scientific cooperation support centres that will have an important role in assisting the parties to implement the GBF, and we expect the Bureau to take into account the views and preferences previously expressed by parties and regions in this regard. In addition, we would like to stress the importance of other means of implementation, including capacity building and development for the implementation of the Convention, but also for its protocols. We are looking forward to working with others to develop the relevant instruments to enhance this. Furthermore, we stress the need for the effective mobilization of resources from all sources, public and private, domestic and international. And in addition, we need to collectively improve the effectiveness of use of the resources currently dedicated to biodiversity. Other means of implementation, such as capacity building and development, will be key, and in that regard, the assessment of needs is essential. Eliminating and reforming harmful incentives and aligning all financial flows with the objectives of the GBF will also make a significant contribution. We consider the mainstreaming of biodiversity throughout the whole of government and society, including all relevant sectors, to be another key component. We therefore hope to be able to ensure the necessary time and attention is given to this issue at SBI4, so we can make progress on setting out the process to elaborate the tools to achieve this. Finally, we would note that cooperation with other relevant bodies is a key component in addressing the challenges we face, and we believe that having the COPs of all 3 Rio Conventions towards the end of this year provides a unique opportunity to align our approaches to cooperation across all 3 agreements. The EU and its member states look forward to working with all distinguished colleagues and under your guidance on the important topics at this SBI. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, European Union and its member states. Now, may I invite the other part of Western Europe and others group. The floor is given to Switzerland, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Switzerland is making this statement also on behalf of Australia, Canada, Iceland, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, the Republic of Korea, United Kingdom, the United States of America, as members of the Just Cans group. We would like to register our appreciation to the government of Kenya, the United Nations Environment Programme, and the CBD Secretariat for hosting this meeting. We express our sympathies to the people of Kenya affected by heavy rain and flooding in recent days. Just Cans would also like to express its gratitude to the government of Colombia for hosting the next COP in Cali and for the preparatory work that has already been launched. Our group of countries is confident that under the present and the incoming presidencies, we will have a successful conference of the parties in Cali, able to take meaningful decisions essential to achieve the goals and targets of the GBF and to find peace with nature. We extend our warmest congratulations to Mrs. Astrid Schumacher for her appointment as new Executive Secretary of the Convention. We all know that after the adoption of the landmark Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, there is a lot of work ahead to operationalize the biodiversity plan. Let us stick to what has been adopted in Montreal and use the very limited time here in Nairobi to make progress on the issues that are critical for the implementation of the KM-GBF. This includes, among others, reviewing the progress in updating the NBSAPs, defining the concrete procedures for the global review of collective progress, addressing the means of implementation, and enhancing cooperation with other conventions and international organizations. Mr. Chair, careful preparation is a prerequisite for successful meetings. In this context, we emphasize the importance that all meeting documents are available 6 weeks in advance of the meeting and express our concern that the deadline was not met for several pre-sessional documents. The late publishing of the meeting documents challenges parties to proceed to a broad consultation process among the stakeholders and to prepare well-founded positions for the meeting of SPI. With this in mind, it will be important to draw the right conclusions to ensure that this can be avoided in the future. In addition, as our meetings get bigger, with more and more complicated agenda items, we need to reflect carefully about how to adapt and innovate our methods. Our experience last week at Substa 26 only reinforces the need to focus some attention on the effectiveness of our processes. Despite the challenges of preparing for this meeting, we are committed to use the time in Nairobi to work with everyone in this room, including with all parties, governments, indigenous peoples and local communities, other relevant multilateral environmental agreements, civil society, academia, women, youth, private sector and others, in order to make progress and prepare the ground for a successful outcome in Cali, Colombia at the next COP. We have exactly 5 months before we come together in Cali to decide on the remaining tools and solutions that are needed to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. Over the course of those short few weeks, we need to work together to overcome our differences, working in a context of trust and understanding. JUSCANS is looking forward to productive, focused and successful discussions here in Nairobi and throughout the process up to Cali. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. Distinguished delegates, I would now like to invite opening statements from major stakeholder groups. I will start by inviting the representative of indigenous peoples and local communities at microphone number 221. You have the floor, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. I take the floor on behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. The IIFB acknowledges the Maasai peoples upon whose land and territory we're sitting. The historical Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, adopted in 2022, recognizes Indigenous peoples and local communities' role and contributions in the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, as well as their contribution as key actors in the fight against biodiversity loss and its implementation at all levels. The adoption of the KMGBF demands a transformational change of the paradigm in conservation to recognize the contribution of Indigenous peoples and local communities. It is only in a very few countries that Indigenous peoples and local communities make a contribution to the processes of updating and reviewing the national biodiversity strategies and action plans and in the national implementation of the KMGBF. In most countries, there are gaps in the development of NBSAPs, and there is no full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities or of women and youth. The IIFB calls upon all parties and governments to promote measures to respect, preserve, and indeed maintain and support Indigenous peoples and local communities' knowledge systems, ancestral practices, and innovations for the conservation and sustainable protection of biodiversity in their review of their NBSAPs. Planning, monitoring, and review mechanisms are all important processes for the implementation of the KMGBF. The IIFB recommends a strengthening of evidence-based reporting through the inclusion of community-based data and information in the preparation of national reports, as well as in the compilation of the global review and reporting in the online reporting tool. The IIFB reiterates its commitment to produce the third edition of Local Biodiversity Outlooks, thus illustrating the contributions of indigenous peoples and local communities to the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework as a complementary publication to the Global Report. The IIFB welcomes the establishment of the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund to support the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and cherishes the hope that projects achieve more than 20% of the total amount of resources for the conservation, restoration, sustainable use and management of biodiversity. And we wanted to achieve more than 20% of the total amount of resources. The IIFB calls for a dedicated mechanism to support indigenous peoples and local communities to ensure they have direct access to resources as well as through appropriate intercultural mechanisms. And finally, the IIFB recommends recognizing the importance of traditional knowledge systems and indigenous technologies in the knowledge management for biodiversity initiative, with due attention being paid to culturally appropriate capacity building and development. This ensuring that traditional knowledge, innovations, practices and technologies of indigenous peoples and local communities are only accessed with their free, prior and informed consent. All of this in keeping with Target 21. The IIFB will continue to contribute to each of the agenda items of this meeting. I thank you.
Thank you, IIFB, for speaking on behalf of IPLCs. Now I would like to invite the CBD Women's Caucus at microphone 257. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am speaking on behalf of the CBD Women's Caucus. The biodiversity framework was agreed upon as a comprehensive package, including the principles outlined in Section C. This includes a whole-of-society approach, a human rights-based approach, and a strong emphasis on advancing gender equality and women's empowerment. The framework's successful implementation depends on the consistent application of all COP15 decisions, including Decision 1511 on the Gender Plan of Action, as highlighted by the multi-stakeholder international dialogue on the Gender Plan of Action celebrated 2 days ago in this venue, organized by the CBD Women's Caucus and the CBD Secretariat. The human rights commitments embedded within the GBF's targets, goals, and related decisions demand urgent translation into accountable actions, thorough monitoring, and transparency and accountability in reporting. These commitments also required appropriate capacity building efforts, knowledge exchange, and the provision of adequate, timely, and direct financial resources, particularly for women and girls. A voluntary or optional approach is no longer feasible to match the alarming continued loss of biodiversity and the threat that such loss poses to human well-being. A compliance with social and environmental safeguards must always be mandatory. All parties, stakeholders, and rights holders in this room have collectively agreed to an ambitious plan. Now, we must ensure its implementation, review, monitoring, and reporting fulfills those ambitions by applying a just and inclusive principles. Women and girls all over the world are directly impacted by biodiversity loss, and it's high time that they are not just included as an afterthought, and their needs to be considered, should be considered in the full realization of the framework. The CBD Women's Caucus stands ready as a dedicated partner in this endeavor. We call on you all to ensure that gender responsiveness and gender equality remains at the forefront of the multi-year program of work of the Conference of the Parties to catalyze our collective actions to safeguard biodiversity for present and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, CBD Women's Caucus. Now, may I invite the representative of youth to make an opening statement at microphone number 272. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. Delegates, this SBI will be a very important one. At COP15, we had big success when agreeing on ambitious, transformative, and actionable global biodiversity network frameworks. Now, we are looking towards you to make this framework a reality. Most of you are currently in the place of updating your NBSAPs to translate the framework into national contexts. We as youth are standing ready to support you with this, but we also ask be included meaningfully, respectively, and effectively from the beginning of the process. Many young people around the world are conserving and restoring biodiversity, addressing biodiversity loss, finding ways to sustainably use it, and working on a transformation of the society to live with and within nature. During your NBSAP updating process and in the global review process, we want to be meaningfully engaged, we want to contribute, and we want to see our role recognized. The 23 goals of Global Biodiversity Framework will only be achievable if we mobilize enough resources. Even more importantly, we need to use the resources in the right way. The resources should reach actors on the ground, in particular, indigenous people and local communities, women and youth. People on the ground are those in the front line implementing the actions needed, and they need the resources to do so. In addition, we can't allow more human rights violations to happen in the name of conservation. We need very strong environmental and social safeguards and human rights-based approaches in implementing the resource mobilization strategy. Regarding mainstreaming and cooperation, it is urgent to address ecosystems and biodiversity from a cross-cutting perspective. Most biodiversity loss is related to economic and financial activities. Biodiversity laws cannot be halted without addressing this and considering the power imbalances between government, private sector, and right holders. Voluntary guidelines and disclosure frameworks are not enough. We urge a better emphasis on the coordinated regulation on the main drivers damaging biodiversity and human rights. In this sense, cooperation between different international agreements also must consider that false solutions such as market-based approaches and especially climate solutions that might be harmful for biodiversity must be addressed in all their complexity. The Paris Agreement and the Global Biodiversity Framework will only be achieved if together as one takes place. In the end, you won't be measured by your words or plans, but your action. We are looking to you to make sure that we all can start and continue to live in harmony with nature. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Global Youth Biodiversity Network, for speaking on behalf of youth. I would now like to invite statements from subnational and local governments at microphone number 265. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take the floor on behalf of the local and subnational government major group, coordinated by ICLE, Regions 4, and the Government of Quebec. Local and subnational government have been very proactive since the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal GBF and its associate decision 15/12 on engagement with subnational government, cities, and local authorities. Implementation of the GBF often falls under the responsibilities and competencies of our constituencies. Thus, local and subnational government can play a key role on the subsidiary body on implementation. We welcome the effective inclusion of the whole of government approach in numerous items of the agenda, notably item 3 on monitoring, reporting, and review, and item 10 on mainstreaming. To ensure continuous review of progress and adequate mainstreaming at all levels of government, we call for support of the online platform Regions with Natures and Cities with Natures, where local and subnational government can already report and are already tracking progress on their implementation of biodiversity strategies and action plan and the GBF targets. The inclusion of local and subnational government can, however, go much further. For example, on item 7 on cooperation, subnational government can be part of the solution and add a graded added value to develop a more comprehensive and holistic approach by jointly addressing the challenge of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, as we demonstrated during our recent participation at Bern 3 meeting. We need a bottom-up, multi-level, and collaborative approach in all MEAs. Regarding item 4 on resource mobilization, we emphasize that addressing the current financing gap for nature will not only need to increase funds, but also to better allocate and leverage these resources to maximize their impact. It is essential to ensure that these funds are used efficiently across different levels of government and sectors of society, amplifying their benefit across various restoration and conservation efforts, and optimizing opportunities for subnational governments and private sector investment. We look forward to further discussing this point this week during a productive meeting, and you can count on our major group support toward an ambitious and effective implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and on the path to COP16. And in closing, and in alignment with tomorrow's theme for the International Day of Biodiversity, local and subnational government are part of the plan. Merci.
Thank you, Regions 4, speaking on behalf of subnational and local governments. I will now invite a statement from the CBD Alliance at microphone number 236 to speak on behalf of a number of non-governmental organizations. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm from the Third World Network, speaking on behalf of the CBD Alliance. We want to see successful implementation of the CBD with its 3 objectives through the relevant GBF commitments. We have some concerns and some suggestions. We are concerned to see implementation of the following elements being pushed through: false, corporate-led voluntary solutions to the massive funding for biodiversity destruction, both through investment in destructive activities such as agro-commodities development, infrastructure, bioenergy and mining, and through harmful subsidies. The reliance on private sector finance, which is profit-oriented and often not oriented to the real needs of biodiversity and peoples. Market-based instruments, such as biodiversity offsets and credits, which imply that biodiversity destruction becomes a source of funding, in many cases, even the only available one. The lack of regulation and scrutiny over corporate wrongdoings. Instead of holding corporations to account, weak self-reporting and voluntary initiatives that do not change biodiversity destructive patterns are promoted. However, we are convinced that if the following elements are prioritized, we can turn things around. Supporting the efforts of indigenous peoples, local communities, women and youth, particularly ensuring that their rights are respected at all times. The human rights-based approach, which is in Section C of the GBF, should be central in the targets, indicators, and implementation tools. Providing the means of implementation in accordance with the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities. The burden of implementation lies more heavily on developing countries, and the developed countries must provide the financial resources as they bear greater responsibility in view of the disproportionate pressures their societies have placed and continue to place on the global environment and of the technologies and financial resources they command. The application of the precautionary principle, particularly with regard to the transfer of technologies, which have to be appropriate and not cause damage to the environment and peoples, and for capacity building for technology assessment. Concrete commitments by parties to develop regulatory frameworks, particularly to regulate those sectors with a high impact on biodiversity, for quantified and binding commitments to redirect perverse incentives, and to ensure that other financial flows are aligned to biodiversity objectives. We call on parties to ensure that implementation goes beyond lip service and that the NBCEPs take the above into consideration through transparent and participatory processes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, CBD Alliance. Thanks to all our speakers for your inspiring remarks at the opening of this meeting. Colleagues, I would now like to take up the agenda item 1B, adoption of the agenda and the organization of work. This will include the election of rapporteur for our meeting. After consultation among the COP Bureau members, I would like to propose the candidature of Ms. Angela Lozan of Moldova to serve as the rapporteur of this meeting. And I invite the SBI to elect Ms. Lozan by acclamation. Thank you, colleagues. It is so decided. Now, I invite Ms. Angela Lozan to please join us at the podium. Before we proceed further, I would like to suggest that in order to make efficient use of time and allow more time for discussions, we refrain from making individual statements to thank or congratulate the chair, the host country, or the secretariat. Therefore, I would like to invite the rapporteur to make a statement of thanks on behalf of all the participants, so that this can be avoided in individual interventions. Ms. Lozan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of all participants at this meeting, I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Reddy, Chair of the Subsidiary Body on Implementation, and members of the Bureau on their hard work in preparing to this meeting, and I wish you the best of success. On behalf of all us, I also thank Dr. Copper, Acting Executive Secretary, and his team to their dedication in the preparation of this meeting. I would also like to thank the Government of Kenya for hosting this important meeting and those parties that have provided generous funding to facilitate the participation of some parties to this meeting. I have no doubt that our deliberations will be very productive. Thank you, Chair, for having given me this opportunity to speak on behalf of all participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lozan. I look forward to working with you over the coming days. Distinguished delegates, this brings us to the adoption of the agenda and the organization of work. The Secretariat, in consultation with the COP14 Bureau, prepared a provisional agenda for the fourth meeting of SBI. The provisional agenda is contained in document CBD/SBI/4/1, and the annotations to the provisional agenda are contained in document CBD/SBI/4/1/add1. I first submit the provisional agenda for adoption. Democratic Republic of Congo, you have the floor, please.
Merci. Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me the floor. The DRC is extremely concerned by the availability, the late availability of documents for a meeting as important as this one. It is regrettable that we have not had enough time to properly consult and analyze all of the documents that we received. Now, we heard an outline presented by the executive director, but we do cherish the hope that this will not happen again, for this is in violation of Rule 10 of our Rules of Procedure. Clear and relevant explanation regarding this should be provided to us to ensure that we do not lose what were good habits thus far, those of respecting our rules and procedures. And finally, the DRC remains pessimistic as to the success of this meeting, given the number of items on the agenda and the time constraints which have been imposed upon us. For this reason, we turn to the Bureau and ask them to be realistic when they propose their agendas. We should have agendas and sufficient time to be able to produce solid documents, ones which are cohesive, rather than always be unduly rushing and come up with superficial documents which don't help us to make progress. We remain wedded to values of democracy, of justice, of fairness, of freedom. And for this reason, we stand ready to work together to come up with better results at the end of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Democratic Republic of Congo, for your comments. I see no objections. Okay. Russian Federation, you have the floor, please.
Спасибо. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. Good morning. Good morning to all of you colleagues. I wish to congratulate everyone here with the beginning of our new meeting. I'm not going to dwell on this agenda item. I merely want to limit myself to noting one thing following the statement made by my colleague from the DRC. Now, at a time when many of us are noticing the large number of agenda items, complications in implementation, and the lack of time for discussing them, I would like to call not only upon the Secretariat and the Bureau to think, to ponder this agenda. No, I want to call upon this whole room and all parties present here. When we draw up decisions, when we draft them, when we demand one or other type of action, including from the Executive Director, it is us who first and foremost have to be wise, reasonable, rational, and think about what volume of work we are placing on the next meeting. Because in the end, now an agenda and the number of items on it does not depend on the Bureau and the Executive Director, but it depends on all of us. So let us all work appropriately. I thank you.
Thank you, Russian Federation. Egypt, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. First of all, Egypt congratulates you to lead us in this very important SPI4, and we hope it will be a very, very successful SPI. Having said that, the issue of delaying documents, as our colleague from Russian Federation said, it was a package. I mean, CUP 15 took place not only in November, December 2020, but it continued here last year. And it was a huge amount of work. This doesn't mean that CBD didn't do their job. It's just we have in the Bureau, we have raised this issue many, many times. And it was impossible to continue the work simply because there were many workshops, there were many consultations, there were many other meetings at different places of the whole world, and all of the outcomes of this came late. And CBD apologized for the late documentations to be sent not on time, but the issue was raised by many others, but we agreed that we hope that this will not be happening. But as I said, it was a package deal of many, many, many items. It was impossible to finish all of them in a very short time as it's supposed to be. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Egypt. Thank you to all the speakers. We have noted the comments on this important matter. The Bureau has also discussed this, and we would like to move on further. I see no objections. So the agenda is adopted, please. Regarding the organization of work, the Secretariat, in consultation with the Bureau, proposes the allocation of tasks for the meeting as described in Annex 1 of the annotated agenda contained in document CBD/SBI/4/1/add1. During this meeting, all formal sessions will be held in plenary. Contact groups may be established as necessary, but not more than 2 groups will meet at one time. Of course, the Bureau will keep the schedule under review as usual practice. With this explanation, I submit the organization of work for approval. We see no objections, so the organization of work is agreed. Distinguished delegates, let us now turn to agenda item 2, review of implementation, progress in national target setting, and the updating of national biodiversity strategies and action plans. There are 2 elements under this item, one related to national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and the establishment of national targets in alignment with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and the other related to the implementation of the Article 8J and related provisions of the Convention. I would like to invite a brief introduction from the Secretariat on both of these elements. Secretariat, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will present the first of the two elements, and my colleague will present the second. For the review of implementation of national biodiversity strategies and action plans and their associated targets, or MBSAPs, the Secretariat has prepared the following documents: CBD/SBI/4/2, review of implementation, progress in the preparation of revised and updated national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and the establishment of national targets in alignment with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This document provides a summary of the MBSAPs and targets received thus far. It also provides a summary of the findings from the dialogues, which are further elaborated in CBD/SBI/4/imp/6, which is a summary of key findings from regional and sub-regional dialogues on national biodiversity strategies and action plans. This document describes a series of MBSAP dialogues that have been conducted to facilitate peer-to-peer exchange and sharing of experiences between countries and to identify challenges and opportunities. As outlined in the document, the series is still ongoing and more dialogues are planned in the upcoming months. I will now hand over to my colleague.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will now provide a brief overview of document CBD/SBI-43, which is a report on the implementation of the multi-year program of work on the implementation of Article 8J and related provisions of the Convention. At its 15th meeting, the Conference of the Party to the Convention, in its decision 516, decided to endorse the program of work on the implementation of Article 8J and related provisions of the Convention on Biological Diversity. The Conference of the Parties conducted an in-depth review of the program of work at its 10th meeting, and in decision 1043, the Conference of the Party decided to revise and update the program of work. At its 15th meeting, the Conference of the Party decided to develop a new program of work on Article 8J and other provisions of the Convention related to indigenous people and local communities, aligned with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework with the full and effective participation of indigenous people and local communities. In response to a request made by the Conference of the Party, the ad hoc open-ended intersessional working group on Article 8J and related provisions of the Convention on Biological Diversity at its 12th meeting adopted Recommendation 12.2 on the new program of work for the consideration by the Conference of the Parties at its 16th meeting. The note before you serves to provide a report on the implementation of the multi-year program of work on implementation of Article 8J and related provision of the Convention, which the subsidiary body on implementation is expected to take note of. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. Before I open the floor for interventions, I would like to remind you that we will discuss the mechanism for planning, monitoring, review, and reporting in the next item, and thus parties should restrict their intervention under this item to considering the progress thus far. We will then discuss the mechanisms for review in the next item. In relation to the report on the implementation of the multi-year program of work on implementation of Article 8J and related provisions of the Convention, please kindly note that this meeting is expected to take note of the report, and the intent here is not to discuss on the new program of work on Article 8J and other provisions. The proposed new program of work will be further discussed at COP 16, but I encourage all of you to take part in an informal dialogue that will be held on the margins of this meeting on May 25th, which will provide an informal platform to further discuss on the key outcomes of the 12th meeting of the ad hoc open-ended intersessional working group on Article 8J and related provisions, including those related to the elements of the proposed new program of work. Additionally, as this is the first substantive item, I would like to encourage you to keep your statements short and concise and to focus on essential points. I'll be limiting the interventions to 5 minutes for parties speaking on behalf of regions, 3 minutes for individual parties, and 3 minutes for observers time permitting. Please submit the full text of your statement to the Secretariat. Please note, however, that your key points, especially those that you would like to have reflected in the draft recommendations, should be read out in the room. Following interventions by observers, I will give a brief chance for parties that may wish to comment on or support any specific proposal made by these organizations. This approach will also be followed during the review of conference room papers at a later stage. I now invite interventions from parties and encourage parties speaking on behalf of the regional groups to request the floor as soon as possible. The statements from individual parties can then refer to these without repeating the details. Statements on behalf of regional groups may be up to 5 minutes. Statements by individual parties will be limited to 3 minutes. Therefore, I will now open the floor to parties. I see Syrian Arab Republic, followed by United Kingdom, and then Ethiopia, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for the documents presented. Chair, Syria was happy to see, as many others, the adoption of the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in 2022. Oh, the microphone has gone off. We hope that we will have a national biodiversity strategy which can be brought into line with this international framework. Syria is not able to complete this yet because current global infrastructure regarding financing for biodiversity is lacking. Our country was not able to benefit from those funds as yet. Chair, how can we ask Syria to comply with the Convention and its protocols, just as other states parties, when it has not been able to receive financial and technical assistance? Syria asks the Global Environment Fund to change its policy towards Syria so it can meet its biodiversity goals under the global framework. In document 4.2 in page 2, in the Arabic text, it says that since the start of the implementation of the decision, Syria has not been able to align its national strategy with global objectives. We ask for the addition in point 10 of the same document that this is not just a delay in the start of its activities as the cause of not having completed its national strategy, but another point is needed. The GF was not able to make available necessary funds to us, which is another source of delay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Syria, Arab Republic. Ethiopia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, Ethiopia is making this statement on agenda item 2, review of implementation of the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan alignment with the coming Montreal GBF on behalf of Africa. Africa acknowledges the support of countries and organizations for facilitation of the regional and sub-regional dialogues on National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, NBSAPs. We commend the GEF for providing financial support for the revision and update of NBSAPs. Nonetheless, we note delays in project implementation in some eligible countries. In this regard, Africa urges implementing agencies to actively engage with eligible countries and ensure the timely transfer of GEF support. The proactive efforts of the 8 parties that submitted their revised NBSAPs serve as an inspiration for the remaining parties. Africa is making progress in aligning its national targets and will submit them within the allocated time frame. Additionally, Africa calls on parties to swiftly submit revised targets aligned with the GBF, covering all means of implementation. At the very least, Africa invites all parties to complete the template adopted by the Conference of Parties and to work towards submitting their revised NBSAPs. This, in our view, will support or help Secretariat of the CBD in preparing the global analysis in time for consideration for the 5th subsidiary body, at which SBI will pilot an open-ended forum for voluntary country review. Africa believes that a comprehensive approach to the NBSAP development process, meaning the revision and update, should adopt both the whole of government and whole of society approach, integrating multilateral environmental agreements, enabling the complete and effective involvement of all stakeholders at national level. Finally, Africa requests adequate and timely financial support allocated from the GEF and its implementing agencies to help eligible parties in completing their NBSAP revision and update. Also, Africa urges the Secretary of the CBD to organize capacity development session for the parties in line with the model outlined in Annex 1 of the COP Decision 15/6, focusing on elaborating national objectives. We will submit the written document. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ethiopia. Now, Switzerland, followed by Cuba and Morocco. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we have less than 6 years left to implement the targets of the KMGBF and to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. Switzerland considers it therefore to be important that parties update their national biodiversity strategies and action plans by COP16. Switzerland has a biodiversity strategy in place since 2012. The strategy defines the main focus of the Swiss Confederation's commitment to conserving species diversity, ecosystems, and genetic diversity on the basis of 10 strategic goals. The government supplemented the strategy with an action plan in 2017. Mr. Chair, Switzerland is currently working on updating the action plan for a new phase of implementation, which will run from 2025 to 2030. The updated action plan is expected to be adopted before COP16. Mr. Chair, we consider the proposed recommendation to be a good basis for discussion under this item. With regard to paragraph 4 on the GEF, while we support to invite the GEF to continue to provide timely support in this regard, this paragraph, in our view, should be considered under SBI item 4, together with the financial mechanism and the guidance to the GEF. We have submitted our changes in writing. I thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. Now, Cuba, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Our delegation reiterates its commitments to the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework adopted by the 15th Conference of the Parties to the CBD. Cuba has made significant progress in the review and updating of its national biodiversity strategies and action plans, or NBSAPs. As a result of a wide-ranging and exhaustive work by expert groups and other interested parties, we are ready to present our strategy and national action plan, the updated ones, up to 2030, to the appropriate governmental authority. We hope to be able to present to the CBD, when the time comes, our updated national strategy and action plans, as well as the template for communication of national targets adopted in Decision 15/6, which features in Annex 1 to that decision. we welcome the holding of regional sub-regional dialogues on national strategies and action plans for biodiversity. In our case, the Caribbean sub-regional dialogue. These dialogues provide an opportunity for the exchange of information on experiences, achievements, difficulties, and lessons learned. All these activities have enabled us to have improved programmatic documents at the national level and a better, more comprehensive contribution to the achievement of the targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Chair, in the light of the national efforts of parties and progress made in updating NB SAPs, Cuba emphasizes the need for the urgent implementation of Article 20 of the Convention and Target 19 of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. In particular, increase in international financing from developed parties to developing parties in the form of new, additional, emerging, and easily accessible financial resources through the Global Environment Fund, ratified by the Global Biodiversity Framework, ratified by the 7th Assembly of the Global Environment Fund in August 2023. This is essential for our countries, along with other means of implementation, such as capacity building and technology transfer. We hope that the 16th Conference of the Parties in Cali, Colombia, will become a historic milestone through radical change in the current lacking trend in terms of international resource mobilization. This is a limiting factor. There are only 6 years remaining until 2030. We need to implement now. Cuba supports the proposal for recommendation for COP16. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cuba. Now I see Morocco, Mexico, Gabon, Japan. Floor to Morocco, please.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you so much, sir. Morocco backs the statement made by Ethiopia on behalf of the African Group. Morocco wishes to congratulate the CBD Secretariat on the detailed note covering progress made by the parties, including the analysis of the information provided by the parties and the conclusions of the dialogues, all presented in document CBD/SBI/4/2. So, Morocco has made great strides in aligning its national objectives with the Global Biodiversity Framework using the technical guidelines drawn up by the UNDP, which we would like to thank for its support and for the series of webinars it has organized to help build up states' capacities. Morocco has adopted the whole of government and whole of society approach to determine the extent to which national goals and targets are aligned with those of the Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as to determine any necessary adjustments. Now, successful implementation of this approach presupposes political will and recognition at the very highest level of governance, and depends on the action and cooperation of all levels of governance and all players in society. Cooperation within this whole of government, whole of society approach will be essential for the development and implementation of a bold, ambitious 2030 biodiversity strategy. And finally, Morocco supports the draft recommendation presented in document CBD-4/2 with the following comments. In paragraph 1, Morocco proposes to add the following sentence at the end of the paragraph after decision 15/6, taking into account a whole of government and whole of society approach to ensure the full and effective participation of all stakeholders, including women and non-state actors, in the review process. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Morocco. Next in line, Mexico, Gabon, Japan, Malawi. Mexico, you have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. The Mexican delegation would like to share that our country has also started working since January 2023 on aligning its national strategies with the Global Biodiversity Framework. We then began the process to determine national targets and some communication processes of the process with relevant stakeholders such as subnational governments, the youth, indigenous peoples, and Afro-Mexican communities for the establishment of voluntary commitments. Currently, we are in the final phase of determining those national targets, and we hope to finish this by the end of July this year. We'll then be able to upload this to the platform of the information facilitation mechanism by that date. As of now, we have created 49 national targets in line with the framework. On document CBD SBI 4.2, in general, we agree with draft recommendation. However, we believe that while we recognize those few countries that have already submitted their revised national strategies, it's also necessary to recognize that a large majority of countries face significant challenges in revising their strategies and in determining national targets. In addition, we believe that operative paragraph 2 needs a call to countries which aren't able to submit their revised national strategies to at least present national targets in line with the framework, such as indicated in Decision 15.6 in Preambular Paragraph 7. In this regard, we have few brief comments on the recommendation, which we have sent to the Secretariat in writing as well for their consideration. On document CBD SBI 4.3, Mexico believes that there's been constant progress made, although limited progress, in the implementation of the multi-year program work on the implementation of Article 8J and linked provisions. At the same time, recognize the adoption of the 4 indicators on traditional knowledge mark a significant progress. Therefore, the country will continue to work in line with that set out in the document to develop methodologies to compile data and to make those indicators operational. In addition, we propose strengthening dialogues with indigenous peoples, the youth, and indigenous women in order to establish mechanisms which facilitate the implementation of the voluntary guidelines set out in the context of the program work of Article 8J. Finally, we believe that it's relevant to establish synergies with the Intergovernmental Committee on Intellectual Property and Genetic Resources, Traditional Knowledge and Folklore of the World International Property Organization in order to broach in a comprehensive manner topics related to intellectual property. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mexico. Next on the screen, I see Gabon, Japan, Malawi, European Union. Gabon, you have the floor.
Merci. Thank you, sir. Now, regarding the issue currently being considered, Gabon supports a position of the Africa Group as put forward by Ethiopia. The progress report on the definition of national targets and the updating of national biodiversity strategies and action plans showed that of the 193 countries covered by the convention, only 8 states parties have submitted their revised strategies and action plans, and this without national targets prior to this meeting. Now, amongst these countries, there's not a single GRULAC and is there not a single state from GRULAC or Africa. And these are major regions. This situation is of great concern, indicating that there is a problem with the implementation of this process. Problem that we together need to resolve. Chair. Gabon wonders about the fact that the countries which submitted their revised national strategies and action plans did not use the Annex 1 template provided in Decision 15/6. We are raising this because we were waiting to hear from them about their experience, given that these exercises carried out by the various parties was to serve as an example to others. Now, this situation reveals the fact that the majority of parties find it difficult to align their national objectives with those of the global program. Sir, this situation is not a new one. since the very first program of 2001 to 2010, as well as that for 2011-2020, the same situation remains true. We must therefore conclude that problems remain and thus solutions need to be found. So, Gabon congratulates the Secretariat upon the organization of the NBSAP dialogues across the various regions and urges the Secretariat to continue this process. Lastly, Gabon wonders whether the recommendations resulting from the various dialogues might not lead to difficulties for the states with regard to Annex 1 of Decision 15/6, which could perhaps be the reason for them not following the guidelines. I thank you. Burkina Faso. Sorry? Yeah, I've got Burkina Faso. I'm working on that. DRC.
I could do some maybe if they're all together.
I'm sorry?
I could do some if they're all together.
I'm fine for now.
Yeah, okay. So Argentina is probably no Guatemala. Shit.
Oh, the DRC, this is what he said earlier on. I've already done this.
Oh, okay.
On the NBSAP dialogues in the evening of Wednesday on the 22nd tomorrow, which coincides with the with the International Day for Biodiversity. We would also like to encourage parties to consider moving forward with the revision and submission of NBSAP in time for the consideration at COP16 for global analysis of NBSAPs. With regard to the document SBI 4/3, we believe that the program of work related to Article 8J of the Convention would require further discussion. Therefore, Japan would like to clarify the status of the report on this matter and looking forward to the informal session. Japan will submit specific text proposals in writing. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Japan. Now, Malawi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Malawi supports the intervention made by Ethiopia on behalf of Africa. Malawi wishes to acknowledge with appreciation the ongoing support by the Secretariat in organizing regional and sub-regional dialogues on the vision of the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans, which provides a platform for parties to learn from each other. This is important in ensuring a standard approach to the process, which will contribute to effective tracking of progress during the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework globally. Malawi has made significant progress toward updating its NBSAP. We wish to thank Jeff for the funding received through UNEP so far, which has allowed us to consult various groups, including the youth, women, local communities, local authorities, thereby applying the whole of government and society approach toward updating our NBSAP. We are committed to work towards meeting the deadline for submission of the updated targets, and it should be able to submit preliminary update by COP16 following the recommended template as provided in Annex 1 of Decision 15/6. Malawi wishes to commend the Food Agriculture Organization for the present support in developing the Regional Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan for the SADC region, which is critical in enhancing collaboration in addressing regional issues. We would like to request further support during implementation of the regional and national plans. With regards to the draft recommendation, we have made textual proposals and we will submit them in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malawi. European Union, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, distinguished colleagues. The European Union and its member states would like to congratulate those who have submitted their revised NBSAPs. We urge all parties to update their NBSAPs or submit national targets separately as soon as possible in time for consideration by SBI 5 and COP16. The European Union and its member states stress the importance of submitting updated NBSAPs and the use of online reporting tool for submitting them, as well as national targets, which is essential for the Secretariat to do a global analysis and to improve the quality of it. For building momentum at COP16 in Colombia, we need to demonstrate that parties are implementing the framework. We ask the Secretariat to provide a specific deadline for the parties to submit their updated or revised national targets in the reporting tool in order to have them included in the global ambition analysis at COP16. Several European member states have recently adopted their NBSAPs and are working on submitting their national targets through the online reporting tool. With regard to the European Biodiversity Strategy 2030, we would like to clarify that the strategy was adopted in 2020, anticipating the GBF and not thereafter. The European Commission will submit the European targets through the online reporting tool. In addition, the European Union and its member states appreciate the organization of the regional and sub-regional dialogues. We are looking forward to the dialogue for our region, WEOC. Finally, we would like to suggest the Secretariat to prepare a draft decision based on an update of the elements in the present recommendation for consideration by SBI 5 and COP16. The European Union and its member states will provide the Secretariat with amendments in writing. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I see on the screen Guatemala, Colombia, China, Fiji, and Canada. Guatemala, you have the floor, please.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. On the draft recommendation in document SBI 4.2, we believe that this draft recommendation does not provide an adequate balance with regards to the progress currently being made by many countries on the review and updating of national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and the concerns expressed in the draft recommendation on the presentation of national targets in line with the template adopted in COP15, Decision 15/6. Distinguished delegates, Chair, Guatemala believes that a subsidiary body on implementation needs to recognize the progress made and challenges faced by countries in socialization processes at national level and the progress made in the development of national targets which are realistic and national agreements which enable the implementation of strategies to achieve those targets. Chair, Guatemala and surely many other countries will submit their national targets prior to COP16. Therefore, Guatemala suggests a text be included in the preambular section of the draft recommendation where SBI says it observes with concern the non-presentation of strategies and targets, but also recognizes the arduous work being carried out on strategies and national action plans on biodiversity aligned with the global framework. We will send all of our amendments to the text suggestions in writing. Finally, Chair, Guatemala believes it's highly important to move forward in recognizing, protecting, and promoting collective action and traditional knowledge linked to the conservation and use of biodiversity. Guatemala is working on approving a law which was passed recently in our Congress for the establishment of a new category of collective management of protected areas and territories by indigenous peoples and local communities. In this regard, we would like to welcome the report on the implementation of the program of work on Article 8J, which sets out very useful information for our efforts linked to this important topic and the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Guatemala. Colombia, you have the floor.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Colombia would like to express its commitment to the updating of Biodiversity Action Plan, as we have set out plans in order to bring together all stakeholders and a roadmap in order to hold multi-stakeholder and intersectoral dialogue with a focus on rights, gender, intergenerational issues, amongst others, in line with key aspects of the convention, and to ensure implementation. This process includes the following areas of work: integration and sectoral coherence, driving a productive model, attention to informal sectors and environmental issues, governance, responsibility, mobilization of resources for collective management and biocultural management of territories for the well-being of indigenous peoples, Afro-Colombians, peasants, mothers, the youth, women, the youth, and others. This text also includes regional areas which have the objective to identify priority areas in order to have regional contributions to biodiversity action plans, a basis for roadmaps for the future. This is a wide-ranging approach, so paragraph 2 of the draft recommendation should take into account a deadline for sending MBSAPs of August, so we'd have sufficient time before COP to have a global overview. Also, in line with paragraph 4 of the draft recommendation, we thank countries for their contributions to GEF for updating MBSAPs. Nevertheless, it's important to mention that GEF resources have been insufficient in terms of making important technical and financial efforts at national level. But we also thank other supporters. Finally, Colombia welcomes the report on the work plan on Article 8J and related issues. It is actively taking part in the informal dialogue on this, including essential topics for indigenous peoples, Afro-descendants, local communities, women, and the youth, in order to promote their participation, full and effective participation, in line with targets 21, 22, and 23 of the global framework. We will send more of our proposed amendments in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Colombia, the incoming president of COP. Now I see on the screen China, Fiji, Canada, Brazil, Argentina. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan is an important policy tool for parties to strengthen biodiversity conservation and convention implementation. Updating and effectively implementing MBSAPs are of great importance in realizing the GBF at the national level. As the COP15 presidency, China attaches great importance to updating MBSAP. Under the guidance of the China National Committee for Biodiversity Conservation, the Ministry of Ecology and Environment, together with 22 departments, has revised our MBSAP. The new MBSAP was released on 18th January 2024 upon approval of the State Council, making China the 7th country and the first developing country to have updated our MBSAP since the second phase of COP15. The COP15 resolution requires parties to submit their revised MBSAPs before COP16. While only 9 parties have done so, China calls on parties to speed up updating MBSAPs. We are well aware that it takes time to formulate quality national policies and that many countries are facing difficulties in doing so. We hope that the Secretariat will organize the remaining regional and sub-regional dialogues soon, and that the GEF and its implementing agencies will provide timely support to eligible countries. Chair delegates, updating MBSAPs is a crucial first step towards effective implementation of the GBF. Now is the time to turn consensus into action and blueprints into reality. China hopes that more support will be given to developing countries. We are also making every effort to launch and operationalize the Kunming Biodiversity Fund to effectively support developing countries in their efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, China. Fiji, you have the floor.
Bulavinaka, Mr. Chair. Fiji rises in solidarity with all CBD parties in its commitment to uphold and align to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and has started its review process and inception of Fiji's NBSAP 2020 to 2025, and in adopting a whole-of-government and whole-of-society approach to ensure it is multi-sectoral and inclusive. And Fiji aligns to a statement from the Asia-Pacific region. Fiji is committed to mainstreaming our biodiversity and climate change commitment in its current review of Fiji's National Development Plan, and includes integrating in our NBSAP other multilateral MEAs such as the UNFCCC, the CMS, the BBNJ, and others to ensure synergies for implementation. Fiji calls on all parties to use opportunities for NBSAP's review to adopt transformative actions necessary, with clear monitoring and review indicators to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. This includes our commitment in protecting 30% and 100% sustainable management of the other 70% of our EEZ, and in addition to scaling up ambitions for conservation and restoration. Fiji supported a sub-regional dialogue on national biodiversity strategies and action plan for the Pacific countries that was held in Fiji from 16 to 21st of March 2024. And we thank the CBD Secretariat in collaboration with SPREP for this. The dialogue allowed us an opportunity to dialogue on how we can further the COP Decision 15/6 and related decisions adopted by parties at COP15, and as well as provide us an opportunity to fully understand and capacitate on some available tools to assist us with our review in our NBSAP and in its alignment. Fiji believes that the ambitious actions are also needed across all of the direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity loss. This is why Fiji is committed to mainstream our updated National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan into our national NDP to ensure biodiversity is adequately mainstreamed and captured. Fiji expresses its appreciation to the Global Environment Facility for the financial support and to UNEP for the programmatic and technical support through the GBF Early Action Support Program. With this support, Fiji aims to deliver its national targets and updated NBSAP in a few months from now. Fiji looks forward to positive outcomes and progress from the SBI4 as we prepare for COP16 in Colombia. We thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Fiji. Now I give the floor to the party which has the headquarters of Convention on Biological Diversity. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Canada views submissions of NBSAPs and/or national targets as a very important element of the multidimensional approach to planning, monitoring, reporting, and review, and a key to the successful implementation of the KMGBF. Canada is working hard to finalize our NBSAP, and we expect to submit it to the online reporting tool in the fall, prior to the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. With respect to the recommended text, Canada is supportive of clear and concise language that urges parties to submit NBSAPs, including national targets, in a timely manner. Canada kindly requests clarifications from the Secretariat regarding the submission deadline for NBSAPs and/or national targets, specifically the deadline to be considered and counted as part of the global review, global analysis of information by COP16. Furthermore, Canada would like to request that an additional paragraph be added to clarify that all NBSAPs and/or national targets submitted prior to the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties will be considered as part of the global review on implementation. Overall, Canada would like the recommendation to focus solely on NBSAPs and/or national target submissions, and that references to other elements of the multidimensional approach to planning, monitoring, reporting, and review is minimized, as those elements are covered under item number 4 of the current meeting. This approach will ensure that the capacity of both the CBD community and the Secretariat is used efficiently. Canada will submit suggested changes to the draft recommendation text shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Now I see on the screen Brazil, Argentina, Uganda, United Kingdom, Ghana. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brazil takes note of the information made available at document CBD/SBI/4/2, and we hope to finalize the development of our national targets and the revision and update of our NBSAP by COP16. In this process, we are working to ensure a high level of ambition in our revised and updated NBSAP to align it with the ambition outlined in the Global Biodiversity Framework. We invite all parties to work in the same direction. As we approach the next COP, Brazil takes note with deep concern that the provision of means of implementation to developing countries through the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund is not commensurate with the challenges faced by developing countries in the implementation of the KM-GBF. Ensuring adequate, sufficient, predictable, and easily accessible international public funding is critical to enable the successful revision and update of NBSAPs and their implementation. Given the complexity of the NBSAP process and the need to leverage investments in national monitoring systems and scientific research programs relevant to biodiversity, it is also essential to enhance capacity building, scientific and technical cooperation, and technology transfer. We would further stress that the development of revised or updated NBSAPs should be based on the inclusive decision-making modalities in order to enable the engagement of indigenous peoples and local communities. We also understand that countries should strive to increase the visibility of the NBSAP process across different sectors, in particular the private sector, as well as governmental agencies, including subnational governments, in order to improve the understanding of the Convention and its coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Regarding the report on the implementation of the multi-year Program of Work on Implementation of Article 8J and related provisions, as presented under document CBD/SBI/4/3, Brazil takes note with concern that tasks 13 and 14 have not been initiated. Task 13 on guiding principles and standards to strengthen the use of traditional knowledge and other forms of knowledge for the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity could provide a wide range of co-benefits for different goals and targets of the KM-GBF. Task 14 on national incentive schemes for indigenous and local communities to preserve and maintain their traditional knowledge, innovations, and practice could contribute to the achievement of targets 13 and 21. In that regard, the draft decision could invite the working group on Article 8J to consider potential actions, tools, or guidance to support implementation of those tasks. We take this opportunity to reiterate Brazil's willingness to engage in the discussions on the establishment of a subsidiary body on Article 8J. We understand that this new subsidiary body should aim at enhancing the representation of indigenous peoples and local communities from developing countries, ensuring consistency with the mandates of existing subsidiary bodies and mainstreaming issues relevant to Article 8J and other provisions across the agenda of the Convention and its programs of work. We hope to continue discussions in that regard in the lead up to COP16. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, Argentina welcomes the opportunity to speak during these discussions on the review of the implementation and updating of national strategies. Argentina's National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan was updated in 2022 with cross-cutting concepts which enable a comprehensive approach to biodiversity. Now, with one eye on COP16 in Cali, we are working on a new update aligned with the goals and targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This work is being conducted under the National Advisory Commission on the Sustainable Conservation and Use of Biodiversity, CONADIBIO, an interministerial and multi-stakeholder body chaired by the holder of the environmental portfolio, with the involvement of state agencies, subnational governments, universities, NGOs, and indigenous communities. On the draft recommendation, Argentina would like to include references to paragraph 3 of Decision 15.6, which recognizes an approach which should avoid excessive burdens on parties, in particular developing countries, and paragraph 27, which calls for the provision of means of implementation for the planning, monitoring, reporting, and implementation for developing countries. We need to be aware of the time constraints for both parties and secretary under which we are working. In addition, Argentina believes that requests to parties should strictly keep to Decision 15.6, in which the submission of NBSAPs and national targets are to be made by COP16 and not beforehand. To conclude, Argentina suggests that observations on the open-ended forum and country-by-country review should be made under item 3 of the agenda on planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. We have sent our comments and proposed amendments in writing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Argentina. I see Uganda, United Kingdom, Ghana, Yemen, Zimbabwe, Malaysia. Uganda, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Uganda supports the position of Africa region as presented by Ethiopia and recalls that implementation would be supported by a number of other decisions, including the decision with enhanced multidimensional approach. We recall Decision 15.6, which called on parties to submit an update on the national biodiversity strategies and action plans, with specific reference to for the clearinghouse. Uganda wishes to express its appreciation to the Global Environment Facility for the financial support and the United Nations Environment Programme for the programmatic and technical support through the GBF Early Action Support Program. With this support, Uganda has already finalized alignment of its existing targets and is on course to deliver its updated national targets by September 2024 and updated NBSAPs by September 2024. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Uganda. United Kingdom, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. We congratulate those parties who have updated and submitted their national biodiversity strategies and action plans. We are excited to confirm that the United Kingdom will shortly publish its NBSAP, including our national targets using the template agreed at COP15. With only 6 years remaining to achieve the 2030 targets, it is critical that we deliver on our commitment made at COP15 to update and revise our NBSAPs before COP16. We are encouraged by the outcomes of the sub-regional and regional dialogues, which have revealed that many parties have made significant progress in revising and updating their NBSAPs. The global analysis of information in NBSAPs to be undertaken for consideration at COP16 will be a key input to the global review of implementation of collective progress, and it is important that this analysis is based on robust and representative information from as many NBSAPs as possible. It is also important for parties to use the agreed template and online reporting tool to communicate their national targets in a standardized format. This will greatly facilitate the global analysis and avoid previous challenges with aggregating information globally. We do not underestimate the challenges faced by parties undertaking this work. We welcome the GEF Early Action Grants Project, which has provided a total of $44.7 million across 138 countries to support eligible parties in their work to align their national targets, NBSAPs, policy frameworks, monitoring frameworks, and finance with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We also note and welcome the initiatives to support parties in their implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. These include the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, the Global Ocean Alliance, and the NBSAP Accelerator Partnership. We encourage parties and others to utilize these support mechanisms as they put their NBSAPs into action. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Ghana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Ghana aligns with the statement made by Ethiopia on behalf of Africa on this agenda item. Ghana wishes to emphasize her commitment to biodiversity conservation and sustainable use and aligning national targets with the goals and targets set forth in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Ghana is on course to certain ambitious national targets that contribute to achieving the global targets. This includes mainstreaming biodiversity considerations into the national development planning process and ensuring cooperation among biodiversity-related conventions while applying the whole of government and whole of society approaches to reverse biodiversity laws. We acknowledge the note prepared by the Secretariat and the summary of progress as captured in Section 2A of CBD/SBI/4/2. We note with concern that no party has made a submission of national targets in accordance with the template adopted by the Conference of Parties in its Decision 15/6 and contained in Annex 1 to that decision, and wish to encourage parties to do so. Mr. Chair, Ghana is looking forward to the Africa Regional Dialogue scheduled to take place here at the Union next week as a platform to share experiences and lessons learned in the course of revising or updating our NBSAPs in alignment with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. I wish to acknowledge and appreciate the GEF for providing resources to eligible parties for the revision and update of their NBSAPs. Particular mention must be made of the support and resources provided by UNEP as an implementing agency to facilitate and make the process of revising our NBSAP a possibility. As a party, at the minimum, we pledge to communicate our national targets, reflecting, as applicable, all the goals and targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, including those related to all means of implementation in accordance with the reporting template provided in Annex 1 of Decision 15/6 by the 16th meeting of the Conference of Parties in advance of the full submission of the NBSAP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ghana. I see on the screen Yemen, Zimbabwe, Malaysia, Djibouti. Yemen, you have the floor, please.
صباح الخير سيد الرئيس. بلدي ملتزمة بالعمل بشكل جدي.
Thank you so much, Chair. My country has committed itself to updating the NBSAPs, despite all of the difficulties which we are facing and which we hope to be able to transcend, because things are moving forward slowly. The updating of the objectives is important, and this is in keeping with the KMGBF, and it requires intensive negotiations with all sectors, all stakeholders, and efforts will have to be made here to achieve these objectives in a country which, like ours, suffers from political problems and problems of civil war. Our government, to ensure that everyone is involved, will spare no effort. We have reported our second strategy in 2017 with objectives which are in keeping with the program through to 2030. Now, of course, time is of the essence when it comes to such consultations. This is in keeping with decision 2/4. Thus far, only a small number of states have submitted their reports. These are countries which have the necessary resources. This is why we cherish the hope that we will possess the right data to be able to submit our model and to submit our reports in a timely manner and to share our experiences with all others. Our country underscores the importance of regional dialogues, ones from which we have benefited a great deal in terms of capacity building, and we certainly hope that this type of dialogue will continue to ensure that we have opportunities to share experiences and to draw the necessary lessons from them. And for this reason, I would like to thank the Secretariat for the work that they have carried out. Despite all of these difficulties, we remain committed to submitting our report in a timely manner, and this before the 6th COP. Thank you.
Thank you, Amen. Zimbabwe, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe aligns itself with the statement made by Ethiopia on behalf of the Africa Group. Zimbabwe recognizes the importance and urgency of aligning the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans, the NBSAPs, to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and hence the process of alignment and national target setting is underway. Furthermore, Zimbabwe appreciates the financial support from the Global Environment Facility in reviewing and updating the national biodiversity strategies and action plans. Zimbabwe calls for continued financial and capacity building support to ensure timeous alignment of the national biodiversity strategies and action plans to the GBF. However, Zimbabwe is yet to participate in the regional or sub-regional dialogues on national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and hence looks forward for the organization of one for our sub-region. Zimbabwe calls for wider stakeholder engagement, promotion of synergistic implementation, biodiversity mainstreaming across all relevant sectors of government, including budgetary provisions, and the economy through appropriate policies and legislation in the revision of the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, NBSAPs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. Malaysia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Malaysia, being one of the world's 17 megadiverse countries, has always been committed to conserving and managing its biodiversity in a sustainable manner. This commitment has been reflected in Malaysia's forest cover, which currently stands at 54.56%, or 18.05 million hectares of its total land area, exceeding the country's initial commitment made at the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. Malaysia's success in fulfilling its pledge would not have been possible without pragmatic, progressive, and long-term development strategies. In this respect, Malaysia has shown its commitment by integrating the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework into its National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, or NBSAP, taking into account national circumstances, priorities, and capabilities. The NBSAP, known as the National Policy on Biological Diversity 2022-2030, was launched on 24 October 2023. Many of Malaysia's national key initiatives are in line with the KMGBF, which incorporates a whole of government and whole of society approach, as well as recognizes the important roles of indigenous people and local communities. This includes the Biodiversity Protection and Patrolling Program, which mobilizes community rangers to strengthen boots on the ground, and the Ecological Fiscal Transfer for Biodiversity Conservation to incentivize state governments to protect and increase coverage of protected areas. This initiative has shown promising outcomes in improving protected area management and combating wildlife poaching, while at the same time enhancing the livelihood of indigenous peoples and the local communities. Malaysia therefore supports and will do its part in fulfilling these document recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia. Now, floor to Djibouti, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Republic of Djibouti supports a statement made by Ethiopia on behalf of the African Group on the current agenda item, as covering in document CBD-SBI 4.2. Chair, we have made considerable progress at the national level on the process to align MB-SAPs and/or national targets on biodiversity with the Global Biodiversity Framework. This is an important step in the updating of the National Strategy and Action Plans on Biodiversity in line with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. To conduct and conclude the updating of the MB-SAPs, we need more technical support with guidance, practical guides, and more regional and sub-regional dialogues on MB-SAPs. Chair, the next 5 months leading up to COP16 will be really crucial for the updating of our MB-SAPs. Regional and sub-regional dialogues are welcome, but we propose to create an interactive platform online for the updating of MB-SAPs within the CBD Secretariat to facilitate our discussions at the national level on updating, but also to share experiences between parties who have already concluded the updating of their MB-SAPs. In recognition of the value of its biodiversity, my country has committed to the conservation and protection of its fragile ecosystems. We have implemented several initiatives and policies aiming to preserve biodiversity and to promote sustainable development. Nevertheless, the table for the alignment of MB-SAPs prepared in 2017 to the new Global Biodiversity Framework is going from orange to red. Indeed, the reports prepared under the project Support for Early Action on the Global Biodiversity Framework, financed by the GEF, have shown that Djibouti needs to do more to align with the Global Biodiversity Framework. In this regard, the results of these reports have underlined that global targets 7, 8, 12, 17, 19, 20, and 23 are weakly aligned with our strategy. The other global targets are moderately aligned with this strategy. In this regard, it has been agreed that our MB-SAPs must be revised to align with the global targets. Therefore, the institutional and political framework needs to be improved, amongst other things, to update environmental legislation on biodiversity and create new protected areas. In addition, to achieve the goals of the global framework, a report on national indicators in line with Table 2 on indicators proposed for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in Annex 1 of Decision 15.5 has been developed, and Annex 1 of 15.6 have been developed and will be officially sent to the Secretariat of the CBD in the next weeks. We will also send our comments in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Djibouti. Colleagues, this is all time we have this morning. We will continue this in the afternoon. Before I adjourn the session, I would like to give floor to Acting Executive Secretary Dr. Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I just wanted to address the request that was made earlier during item 1B by the Democratic Republic of Congo, who asked for an explanation for the lateness of the documents. We have had some discussions or provided some information with the Bureau. I just note that there are indeed some sort of systemic or permanent issues, which the statements of Egypt and the Russian Federation alluded to, but also some reasons that are specific, I think, to this period in time, some particular challenges that we have in the Secretariat at this time, which will be resolved shortly. I acknowledge the need for further discussions on this in the Bureau, and also, of course, as we prepare the program of work and budget for COP16, and as they are addressed at COP16. Having said this, I don't want to absolve any responsibility of the Secretariat. We still underline the apology that I made earlier. But for now, I would like to reassure you and all delegates and all parties that we will ensure that the documents will be on time for the upcoming meetings. The working group, the second meeting of the working group on digital sequence information, the fifth meeting of SBI, and COP16 and the concurrent meetings of the protocols. So we will make sure that the rules are respected for those upcoming meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper, for your clarifications. I now adjourn this forenoon session. We will assemble back in the hall at 3 p.m., please. Thank you.
To invest in it. So look, Dr. Reddy, we've got to take